I generally had a lot of good sex. I always sort of thought of sex like a hobby, so I wanted to be very good at it. For me, like many other people, I had a history of trauma, and there was some sexual trauma and some other physical and emotional trauma. And I learned at a young age to shut myself down. It was too much to feel as a little girl, and so I turned my body off. And sex wakes the body up. And so when I was connecting with someone sexually, it made me feel things I didn't want to feel, because I was too scared to feel them. And that's how drugs and alcohol came in and allowed me to be in my body but not really in my body. And so a big part of my journey has been healing trauma and working through that, using meditation, using body work, using therapy, all kinds of things to heal and wake up. And it's been quite a journey. And so now I help others to do that as well. So many of us, people of all genders, have experienced some kind of trauma, and many of us unfortunately have experienced sexual trauma, which causes us to turn away from our bodies and to live in our minds and to not have a fully liberated sexual experience. And that was definitely the case for me, but it's changed a lot. Mindful sex doesn't necessarily mean that you're having sex with one person who's your monogamous partner. You could be doing it with a stranger, you could be doing it with multiple people. It's really just about being present, being there for it. And so mind-blowing sex is actually being able to taste the tastes, to smell the smells, to feel all of the sensations, and to possibly connect to something bigger. I think it's important to have mindful sex because I actually think it can help save the world. I think that when people are showing up for this incredibly vital part of being human in a mindful, conscious way, they are transforming themselves. When we transform ourselves, we model that for others, and ultimately the world can transform. As humans, sex is such a primal part of the experience. And so many of us are so shut down around that. And so that means, in my opinion, we're shut down in all kinds of ways. When we wake up to our sexuality, wake up to our authentic sexuality, when we allow ourselves to evolve and develop sexually, we are doing the same thing in all areas of life. And I think that's incredibly important for the future of humanity, honestly. I also think it's important that people have mindful sex because it feels better. It's better, it's more fun, it's hotter, it's more pleasurable. And I think we can all use more pleasure in life. Also, it teaches us to show up for pleasure without grasping at pleasure, right? Without trying to hold on to it. Mindfulness asks us to just greet what is in the moment. And so we can continue to explore what pleasure is moment to moment. It helps us to lean away from orgasm being the most important part of sex, and instead it's the whole thing, it's the whole journey, which again leads into life, right? It's not just about those moments where the best thing happens, where we get the job or the person we like likes us back, or we have enough money in our bank account. It's all of it. It's being present for all of it. And so it's the same thing in sex. When I was about 3 years old, I had an experience with some much older boys in the neighborhood, and they basically asked me if I wanted to have some sort of sexual experience with them, but I didn't understand what they meant. I didn't know what that meant. And I have very little memory of it, but I can only imagine it must have been quite traumatic for me, especially at that young age. And it wasn't until I was on a meditation retreat and I started having some very intense experiences and realized that there was this young little girl part of me that needed to speak and needed to be heard. And she did. She spoke to me and she told me what happened. And I just sat and held her, basically. And after that experience, I felt very different. It was a very healing experience. There were a lot of other traumas for me growing up as well. I grew up in a home of alcoholism and mental illness on both sides of the family, and so everything that goes along with that. My parents were also really amazing people. My father is no longer living, my mother is. My mom taught me to meditate, my father taught me about film and art, and they were amazing parents, but they were also dealing with a lot of limitations given how they had grown up. And so living in that environment and then needing to take care of myself at such a young age created a lot of emotionally challenging experiences. So when I was about, 27, I got sober, stopped drinking, stopped doing drugs, and started meditating. I just woke up. And once I saw the world in a different way and saw myself in a different way, I couldn't help but allow everything else to change. I just wasn't the same anymore. One of the most important pieces of it, I think, is learning to love yourself. The more that you love yourself, the more amazing your sex life can be. And learning to love ourselves is an ongoing process. I love myself more today than I did 6 months ago because I've learned to love myself more. And so I think the journey of self-love and self-compassion is a really important part of mind-blowing sex. Mindful sex can be with your long-term partner in a soft bed with rose petals sprinkled and incense and instrumental music playing in the background and gazing into your partner's eyes and breathing in sync. Or it can be fucking a stranger in a bathroom at a party. Either one can be mindful sex. It doesn't need to look a particular way. You don't need to be having sex with someone of a specific gender. You don't need to be having a specific kind of sex. It's just, are you actually there for it? Are you present? Do you want to be there? And are you safe? Really, that's it. You can have mindful sex and watch porn, for example. I'm a big proponent for ethical porn that's made in an ethical way and consumed in a conscious way. But many times people think, oh, porn and mindfulness can't go together. They can definitely go together. I had one relationship in which I faked orgasms, and I was young, I was 14, 15, and I faked it every single time. And after that relationship, I swore I would never do that again, and I never did. I never faked it again. When we do that, we're limiting not only our own pleasure, but our ability to connect. We're swimming around in dishonesty in a moment when really we ideally would be open and transparent and honest. I think we fake orgasms because we feel not good enough. We feel not lovable. We feel like we need to be something other than what we are. And this is just one way in faking an orgasm that comes up. I think most folks have a sense of that, a feeling of I'm not good enough. And so it's very healing to say, I'm not going to fake pleasure anymore. I'm going to actually believe that I deserve pleasure. And so that's the way I work with people, is just helping them understand they're lovable, they're good enough, they do deserve to experience pleasure. After my book came out, I started dealing pretty seriously with chronic illness and chronic pain. And so I found it really funny that my book comes out and then I'm having less sex than I've ever had in my life. And so I talk about that now, right? It's like, just because I wrote a book about sex doesn't mean I have a perfect sex life. I did have a really amazing sex life, and then my body started needing a different kind of care. So now I'm discovering what is it like to have mind-blowing sex with a body that's sometimes in a lot of pain. So it's a whole new journey. I think I'll definitely be having sex when I'm 70. I think I'll probably be having better sex when I'm 70 than I am now, is my guess, because I'll be that much more evolved and awake. I will say that the bar is very high now for who I'd want to have sex with, because it's really important to me that my partner is present and can really be there with me. And the cool thing is that more and more people are opening up to the idea of mindfulness and sex, the idea of really being there for it. So opens up the possibilities.